Here's something you've probably noticed without quite being able to explain. The wealthiest person in most rooms is almost never the most obvious one. Not the person in the newest car in the parking lot. Not the person with the most expensive watch. Not the person whose clothing announces the most clearly that it cost a lot of money. Usually it's someone quieter than that. Someone whose clothes are good but not branded. Whose car is reliable but not remarkable. Whose lifestyle doesn't broadcast a number. Someone who, if you were guessing net worths in the room, you would consistently underestimate. And here's what's interesting about that pattern. It's not accidental. It's not that wealthy people don't know how to spend money on visible things. It's that at some point, most of them made a specific calculation. That the advantages of keeping their financial status invisible outweigh the social rewards of broadcasting it. And that the people spending heavily to look wealthy are actually funding the gap between themselves and genuine financial security one status purchase at a time. My name is Dave, and I love helping people see that what looks like a style choice is often actually a competitive financial strategy, and that the people who figured it out are building something the people trying to look wealthy are funding for them. Let's start with something called the visibility tax. Every dollar you spend making your financial status visible is doing two things simultaneously. First, it's not compounding, obviously. It's spent. Whatever that dollar would have become over 10 or 20 years at 8% annual returns is a future that doesn't exist because the dollar became a visible signal instead of an invisible asset. But here's the second thing the visibility tax does that almost nobody talks about. Visible wealth attracts costs that invisible wealth doesn't. When your financial status is broadcast through your possessions, a specific set of social and financial demands attaches to it automatically. Friends in your orbit expect certain things from you. Family members calibrate their asks to what they perceive you can afford. Colleagues assume your lifestyle choices are available for their expectations. The person who visibly has money gets asked to split things less evenly, gets targeted more aggressively by salespeople, gets approached more frequently with investment opportunities, and faces a subtle but consistent social pressure to maintain the standard they've publicly established. None of these costs are enormous individually. Collectively, they represent a significant ongoing tax on visible wealth that invisible wealth simply doesn't pay. The person who looks broke in that same social environment moves through it differently. They split things evenly, they aren't targeted by the same sales pressure. They get offered the same deals as everyone else rather than the premium version their apparent wealth would otherwise attract. And crucially, nobody expects them to maintain a standard they've never publicly established. The visibility tax is real. It's ongoing, and it compounds in the wrong direction for as long as the visible wealth signal is maintained. Now let's talk about the negotiating position that comes with looking broke, because this is probably the most underappreciated strategic advantage in the entire picture. Almost every significant financial transaction in your life involves a negotiation. The salary conversation, the car purchase, the contractor quote, the mortgage rate, the insurance premium, the lease negotiation, the vendor relationship, the freelance rate. In every single one of these transactions, the counterparty is trying to extract the maximum amount the other person will pay. And the single most powerful piece of information they use to calibrate that maximum is their read of your financial status. Walk into a car dealership in expensive clothes driving a luxury vehicle, and the negotiation starts from a completely different baseline than walking in looking unremarkable. The salesperson's mental model of what you'll pay shifts the moment they see you, not because they're consciously manipulative, because they're experienced at reading financial signals, and their read determines their opening position and how hard they'll push back against yours. The same dynamic runs through every significant negotiation. The contractor who quotes a renovation sees your neighborhood, your house, your car in the driveway. The salary negotiator looks at your LinkedIn and your professional presentation. The insurance agent assesses your apparent lifestyle. Every financial counterparty you encounter is calibrating their position partly based on the financial signals you're broadcasting. Looking broke, or more precisely, looking financially neutral rather than financially flush, consistently produces better starting positions in negotiations across every category, not because deception is the strategy, because not broadcasting a premium removes the justification for charging one. The person who quietly has $400,000 in index funds and drives a 4-year-old Honda is getting better prices on almost everything they buy than the person with $80,000 in assets and a leased BMW. Not because of anything they're doing actively, because of the signal they're not broadcasting. Here's the mathematical picture of what the strategy produces over time. Let's take two people, same income, $95,000 a year, same starting position. Person A allocates $1,200 a month to visible status signals: the car payment, the wardrobe maintenance, the neighborhood premium, the restaurant standard that matches the image. Not extravagant, just the ongoing cost of projecting a certain financial image consistently. Person B allocates that same $1,200 a month to invisible wealth: index funds in a brokerage account, additional mortgage principal, HSA contributions, things that compound quietly with zero social visibility. After 10 years at 8% annual returns, person B has $220,000 more than person A. After 20 years, the gap is $660,000. After 30 years, the gap is $1.6 million. The visible wealth never compounded. The invisible wealth compounded on everything person A spent on looking wealthy. And here's the specific irony that makes this calculation genuinely uncomfortable. At year 30, person A still needs to maintain the income to support the lifestyle signals. Their financial life is structurally dependent on the income continuing. Person B, with $1.6 million more in actual assets, has options person A doesn't. Can take a lower, paying more meaningful job. Can weather income disruption without crisis. Can make financial decisions based on what they actually want, rather than what the mortgage and the car payment and the lifestyle image requires. Person A spent 30 years looking wealthier. Person B spent 30 years becoming wealthier. And the compounding gap between those two strategies is $1.6 million and the freedom that comes with it. Let's talk about something the personal finance world underexplains: the psychological experience of decoupling your identity from your possessions. Because this is the part that sounds like the hardest sacrifice and turns out to be one of the most liberating things people describe once they've actually done it. When your self-concept is tied to the visible signals you project, maintaining those signals becomes a psychological requirement rather than a choice. The car isn't just transportation, it's proof of something. The neighborhood isn't just a place to live, it's a statement. The wardrobe isn't just clothing, it's a credential. And once these things become psychological requirements, you lose the ability to make rational decisions about them. You can't downsize the car because that feels like admitting something. You can't move to a cheaper neighborhood because that feels like going backwards. You can't stop buying the right clothes because that feels like losing ground. The financial decisions stop being about what makes sense and start being about what the identity requires. And the identity's requirements are set by comparison to the people around you, which means they inflate automatically as the peer group's standards inflate, with no ceiling and no natural stopping point. The person who has deliberately decoupled their identity from their possessions doesn't have this problem. The car is transportation. The neighborhood is a place to live. The clothes are functional. Decisions about all of them can be made rationally based on value rather than identity preservation. And the freedom that comes from that decoupling isn't just financial, it's psychological. The absence of the constant low-level pressure to maintain appearances. The ability to make decisions based on what you actually want rather than what the image requires. The quiet confidence of someone who knows their financial reality and isn't performing anything for anyone. That confidence looks different from the outside than expensive things do, but it's more durable, and it doesn't have a monthly payment attached to it. Here's something worth sitting with about the people in your life whose financial situation you most respect. Not the people who look the most successful, the people whose actual financial situation you respect most, the ones who seem genuinely free, who make career decisions based on what they want rather than what they need, who don't seem stressed about money in the way most people are, who have an ease around financial decisions that suggests real margin rather than performed confidence. Almost universally, those people are not the most visibly wealthy ones in their social circle. They're the ones whose lifestyle projections are modest relative to their actual financial position, who drive reasonable cars and live in reasonable houses and wear ordinary clothes, and whose visible financial signals systematically understate what's actually been built. Not because they're performing modesty, because they understood early that the gap between what you show and what you have is where the real wealth lives. That every dollar not spent on signals is a dollar compounding invisibly toward the freedom visible wealth can never buy. Looking broke isn't a sacrifice, it's a strategy. And the people who figured that out first are building something the rest of the room is funding with their status budget. The question is which side of that transaction you want to be on.